Good evening, everybody. Since this is our first ARC meeting, I will go ahead and start it off by asking if there are any nominations or volunteers for the position of chair. Councillor Osanek.
Thank you. I nominate Hutchinson to be chair of ARC.
Okay. Councillor Hutchinson, do you that? I'll take Councillor Kiley. Assume nobody else is interested in volunteering. In that case, I'll call the question. All in favor? All right, and that passes. Now for a nomination or volunteer for the position of vice chair. Councillor Hutchison, impeccable attendance record.
I nominate Councillor Osanek.
Okay, Councillor Osanek, you accept. Councillor Hutchison is in favor. That passes, and I'll turn the meeting back over to the chair. Thank you for volunteering.
Okay, so that had all the appearances of a democratic exercise. We were just joking about that before, so hard to resist. So item 3 is approval of the agenda. Could Councillor Sanik will move that, seconded by Councillor Stroud. Any additions, subtractions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay. Confirmation of the minutes of April 25th, 2019. Councillor Sanik, you were here anyway. Yeah. And a seconder? Councillor Stroud. Any corrections? No, seeing none. All those in favor? Thank you. Oh, and September the 4th, that's better. 2019, those minutes. Councillor Sanik, Councillor Stroud. Corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor? Passes. Okay. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Okay. Nobody in the council is making any money off of this. So that's good. So passing by delegations. 6A. Clark Mackey, Oak Street Food Forest Group will be present to speak on community orchard and edible forest policy. Please, Mr. Mackey. Yes, that would be good. That's what we're used to. Yeah, all right. Creatures of habit.
Okay. So thank you for giving us a few minutes here to just talk about this. So I'm from the Oak Street Community Garden. Now, when I initially brought this up, I did submit some documents. But I don't think that they got into this package of minutes. So I can send those to you. But basically, we are planning to plant an orchard up at Oak Street Community Garden. And we've got it's been approved to do it, and there's a contract, and the contract has actually been signed. But in the process of doing that contract, we identified a few, what we consider to be fairly significant problems with the Oak Street, with the policy, the food policy. And that's really what we're here to talk about. So I just want to say, on the whole, it's a good policy, and there's lots of good things about it. It was developed with the community, and but it is due to be looked at this year. And so I'd like to bring up a few things. So the first thing is, there are permissions requested or required. And one of the permissions is that basically every tree or bush needs to be approved by the city in advance. And then the second thing is that a prior permission is required for temporary structures, including but not limited to signage, fencing, picnic tables, etc. And what we found is that it's really, really difficult to do that all ahead of time. We can sort of submit a plan and say we're going to put so many apple trees and so many pear trees and so many bushes, but there are so many contingencies. In other words, we might be able to find a better tree or a different arrangement, or the site isn't susceptible to certain things or whatever, and we need to be able to make quick decisions about those things and be able to take advantage of deals. And if every single bush has to be approved by the city in advance, it just becomes an impossible situation, right? So, and the same with, there are often temporary structures of various kinds that need to be put up, including signs. And again, if all of that has to be done ahead of time, I mean, in fact, it doesn't, right? I mean, we don't get permission for all of the things that we do because we just go ahead and do them. But I think I feel uncomfortable about doing that when it's actually breaking the policy. So one of the requirements is that we do have to submit an annual report to the city. And what we're suggesting is that in those annual reports, we give an inventory of what plants we've planted and why, and we also talk about any structures that are there, and that time the city staff would have a chance to vet those things and say, no, you can't have that sign, or you can't have that table there, or you can't plant that tree, and we would obviously have to take it out. But it just means that it would only happen at one time instead of every single time we want to plant something, we have to get permission. So that it's partly administrative. I think the city can't, I would suspect that the city doesn't want to have to deal with all of these things as they happen. But the bigger one, I hope, is the compost issue. Because basically what the policy says now is that all compost must be removed from the site. So all prunings and all fruit that falls on the ground, or rotten fruit or whatever, all that stuff has to be taken away and to somebody's house and put in their green bins. But in fact, the policy also says that we're supposed to follow permaculture principles. And permaculture is that you take all the compost that comes from the orchard and actually use it as compost in the orchard. And in fact, we proposed that. We actually put a maintenance plan to the city as part of our application to plant the trees. And that plan, which was a permaculture plan, where we were keeping all the compost on site and cutting it up into small bits and all of that sort of thing, that was accepted and approved, even though it actually goes against the letter of the policy. So it seems to me that there's a contradiction in the policy that we would like to address. I think that, I mean, there are, in some cases, some of these issues then move to what's also the contract, which refers to the policy. So, and then the other thing that I had a little bit of trouble with is that—
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute? Thank you, I'm almost done. The city can terminate the agreement, quote, without giving cause or reason within 30 days notice. And I feel like that is a little bit of if you actually do want to encourage volunteers to spend hours and hours of their time, and believe me, putting this orchard together has been a huge amount of work for a lot of people. You might want to take out the without giving cause or reason in that part of the, that's in the contract, it's not actually in the policy, but anyway. Questions, I guess.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Councillor Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few questions. Was that your very last slide? So those are the major things. And then are staff aware of those, or have you come to us first?
I believe the staff has been informed of our concerns, yes.
Okay, so we can follow up then and then see if we have to do it as a motion to get it changed we'll follow up.
Yeah,
Unless
and I
staff
think the staff is probably going to want to talk to us some more too. As far as I
Okay.
understand.
Mr. Clerk, is any of the staff that know about the food forest here to provide comment?
Yes, they are.
Members of staff here, and just as an additional point of information for the committee is, according to the policy, the director does have the ability to amend the policy as well, so it does not require any type of motions or actions of council. So just if you're thinking that way, the director does have that power.
That's great to know. So, Mr. Chair, can you ask staff for comments so that we can hear that before we go on to other things?
That was not possible. I allow it, so it's the chair that speaks. So I think the director has something to say. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So just to get started, the Director of Recreation and Leisure Services does have the authority under the policy to make changes. We have spoken with the delegation, and we will sit down outside of the committee and discuss what has come forward. Obviously, as you know, anytime that we have a policy that has been endorsed by council, we look to something that's all encompassing, right? Like citywide. So yes, we do have different community gardens and edible forests throughout the city, but in different parks, and every park is laid out differently, right? So it has different amenities to it. So some might have playground structures, some might have trails. So it's about what is the proper location so that it doesn't necessarily maybe impede the pathway or impede the structure, and what does that look like? As far as the first couple of points that have been brought up to staff, we can definitely sit down and work through those. I do want to just maybe mention the contract language. That 30-day clause is obviously typical legal, I don't want to say jargon, but it is jargon that are in the majority of our contracts about termination. So that's not something that we obviously ever take lightly. There would be conversations about that obviously ahead of time, but that's something that legal would have put in there.
Thank you. So 2 other questions. I'm in contact with the I can't remember the name of it, but it's the community garden group at Days Road and Front Road, because I know they were going to do big things with their forest garden this past summer, and I don't think that happened, and I don't know if it's because of these clauses. So you've been in contact with them?
Yes, in fact, there are a couple of people from that garden that are also members of our food forest too. So we're in constant conversation with them on a regular basis. So we know what they're doing, and they support these changes that we're suggesting too.
Great, that's excellent. And then if you could go back to one slide, and then the slide before that, right? So where you say that maybe one way to help those 2 clauses is to do an annual report that wraps everything up at the end of the year. Would you consider doing a proposal for what kind of things you have in general planned for this coming year, and maybe do that in the spring so it's ahead of time, and we're looking at apple trees, pear trees. I'm just going by all the things the people at, I think it's, what's the name of that garden called, at Days Road and Front Road? Yes. They all came to me, last April, saying, these are all the problems, and I never did help them, but these are all the problems, and, they kind of had a plan ahead of time, and that might help in this situation.
So in order to get permission to plant an orchard, we do have to go through quite an extensive application process that includes a plan that says the trees that we're going to plant and all that sort of thing. So we've done that, and we're going to try to follow that, and so far we have followed it more or less. But and I think both orchards are going to be planted in the spring for the most part. We planted 3 trees in the fall, but we're going to plant the rest of our trees in the spring, and I think Lakeside? Lakeside is going to do that. Lakeside is going to do that as well. You make the proposal, but I just think that the problem is that as things go along, we might have to change things. right? That's all. And we do have, it's in the contract that we're supposed to write an annual report anyway. So it's just, what I'm saying is make that the place where permissions happen rather than at some indeterminate point in the middle. Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In talking with staff, have you talked about the location? Because I know if it hasn't already happened, and forgive me if it has, there's a path extension that will be happening. I didn't want any potential interference either way, because both are great things for the city.
Yes. So yeah, we're big fans of that path, and it has been built, and and we were in fairly regular contact with the people on that city who were dealing with that, and so yeah, the location of the orchard was chosen actually to correspond with the path. So yeah, the path actually goes through the orchard, which is what we want.
Very nice, yeah, thank you. And Mr. Chair, through you to staff quickly, isn't technically the Oak Street Park a municipal allowance for a potential road extension, which we hope never ever even is brought forward as a consideration? And if so, how can we get that off the books so that threat is eliminated entirely? Is it?
I don't think they have, but there's some experience with this. Yes, the Leroy Grant Drive extension. And I was just thinking about that myself. And as far as I know, it's still on the books and still intended to go through. And it may have something be important for the whole downtown traffic management plan. But I'm not sure that it has to go near, like, close enough to the gardens to disrupt them.
Okay, we'll watch that closely.
Well, we might need to appropriate something on the other side. Sorry, go ahead. You've got something about that.
Hi, I'm Nick Law, and I'm with Clark at the Garden, and I dealt with some of the city staff about the placing, so I can give you a little more context on that. The strip of land there is split. So if you're along the Novellis fence, that is a road allowance for Leroy Grant. And if you're along the fences of Victoria Street, like the backyards there, there's a section that's actually considered Oak Street Park, because when you get to Oak Street, there's like a jog and there's houses. So if the road allowance does go through eventually, it'll wipe out most of the community garden, but not the food forest, because the city staff kind of got us to place it close to the fences over there.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful.
It's a good question. Councillor Stroud.
Follow up to Councillor Kiley's question. In the eventuality where that happens and the community garden section has to be relocated, is there sufficient space, in your opinion, at the Oak Street Garden site, if there were eventually a road there, to be able to relocate the community garden section?
I know when city staff at the food forest allocation with me, they kind of, if you can imagine, you got the Novellis fence, then the community garden, then the path, then the food forest, and then you'll have the Victoria Street kind of yard lot lines. And it's a very long stretch. So their thought was the food forest could potentially stretch longer, and that potentially the community garden could be re-imaged as a very long, like, north-south stretch. It would be very different than what's there right now. Like, it's possible, but it would be a giant change, and it'd probably be less space.
It'd be more of a linear than a more rectangular garden than it is now, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, like, I think we'd probably end up having to reduce size. Yeah.
Good to know, thank you.
And we've also spent a decade making the soil, so having to move would be a, again, many hours of work.
Okay, any other questions? No? Did staff have anything you want to add?
For you, Mr. Chair, the thing I just wanted to comment on was the wording under 3.1.17. As far as temporary structures, as you know, when a structure becomes over a certain size, obviously a building permit is required. So that has a process that it has to go through. Anything under, and the group has identified, they're not talking about sheds, but I just want to make sure we're clear about that. But as far as signage, my understanding from my team is the fact that signage within a community garden is fine, but once you get outside of the community garden, we just want to make sure that the signage that is in our parks is all standard across the community, because otherwise we've had complaints in the past about, signage in Woodbine is different from signage at John Machin, which is different from signage at City Park. So our Parks Development Unit has been working diligently the last 4 or 5 years to make sure signage across the community is all standardized. The other thing is that when it comes to fencing and picnic tables, we just want to make sure that whatever is in our parks is safe, and that's where our Public Works Department comes in, is all of the fences and the picnic tables and other structures we take a look at those, on a schedule, right? So I just want to make sure that you have that information. We're still happy to discuss that with the delegation and with the groups, but that's the wording around that in the policy.
Thank you. Questions? That being the case, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So now we'll move on to the main business item, which is item, there's a briefing before that, which is part of that. 7A, Kirsty Hanako, and the Executive Director, and Felix Lee, the Grants Coordinator of the Kingston Arts Council, will speak to the committee about the Kingston Arts Council plan for administration of the arts funding. And you can stay there, sure.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I'm Kirsty Hanako, the Executive Director of the Kingston Arts Council. As was mentioned, this is Felix Lee with me, our Grants Coordinator. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you about the proposed revisions to the Kingston Arts Council plan for administration of arts funding for the Corporation of the City of Kingston in 2020. As per our service level agreement with the city, the KAC is charged with the administration of CCAF, the City of Kingston Arts Fund. The Board of Directors of the Kingston Arts Council maintains oversight of the KAC staff and our administration of CCAF, and the KAC provides quarterly CCAF reports to Cultural Services. Each year, we gather feedback from all stakeholders involved in the most recent CCAF application process with the goal of refining the plan for admin for ongoing improvement. This feedback is collected throughout the grant cycle, including through regular feedback sessions and discussions with applicants. In addition, on the 2nd of October 2019, the KAC hosted a grants committee meeting to review the CCAF process. We also held a separate meeting in September with Danica Lahi, the city's Manager of Arts and Sector Development, to gain her perspective and discuss potential changes. So based on this feedback and our insights as administrators of the fund, the KAC has proposed several revisions to the plan for admin for 2020. The Arts Advisory Committee approved the draft Plan for Admin 2020 on the 14th of November, and it was also approved by the KAC's Board of Directors at their meeting on the 21st of November. So I'll briefly review the 6 recommended changes, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. The first is that we have completed some formatting and linguistic changes to clarify the application procedure for those wishing to apply for a project grant without a sponsor, which is called a direct application. So this section also includes some new language around community partners, and I'll refer back to that in a moment for one of the other changes. The second change is we removed the option for applicants to apply as a or joint project. As in the history of the fund, this option has never been used. So this is now reflected in the direct application section as referring to community partners, which better reflects current practice. Third change, in 2020, applications will only be submitted digitally by email with no hard copies as has previously been required. So revisions were made to the plan for admin to reflect this change and outline the submission procedure. We've also indicated that applicants can only provide corrections and or updates to their application up until the application deadline. The applications will then be submitted to the jury as they've been received as at that deadline. Number 4, we removed the incomplete and inaccurate application section, and we simply just integrated this content into the application periods and receipt of applications section. For the 5th, clarity has been provided around the procedures for requesting extensions to deadline dates, including the deadlines for applications, interim reports, and final reports for CCAF funding. And lastly, additional detail regarding the role of City of Kingston representatives as part of the CCAF Grants Committee was added to that applicable section. So our grants coordinator, Felix, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Just making sure you don't have to speak. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One quick question about the hard copies. In the past, were you saying, sorry I missed, that they had to have a hard copy and an electronic copy, and now you're saying only electronic?
This is correct,
okay.
Yeah. And certainly Felix, jump in if you have a comment as well. But in the past, we noticed a lot of the difficulties we might have with applications being incomplete, that sort of thing had to do with the hard copies. You know, there was a photocopy that was missing. There were, I think, how many copies they had to provide? 7?
So in the past, for every year of this program, they've had to submit 7 identical photocopies and an original, which we found was just it's too much to ask of the applicants. Particularly in the project stream, they don't have offices, they don't have budgets, they don't have photocopiers. And so we made this change for accessibility, and also that we felt a lot of the issues that were happening with incomplete or inaccurate applications had to do with those paper copies. So for the last 3 years, they've also submitted an electronic copy. So they're going to continue that exactly as they have been without the additional paper. So there will be just less labor for them and no significant change to what they actually have to do for the application.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions? Councillor Stroud.
This is regarding the changes to the wording about the ex officio members' participation in the grants process. So I've read the section in the appendix, but I don't have the original to compare it to. So you just maybe give it more detail over exactly what's changing in the wording of the participation of the ex officio members. I've been one myself, and probably some of the other members have as well. So I'm familiar with the process, but I'm just wondering what the changes in wording are.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's grab that section. I've got it here if you want to.
I found, I was just looking at G2B, but there might be other parts that are relevant too.
So I can answer that question. The change is exclusively in G2B. And essentially, the section that you're looking at is, it says, I, City of Kingston Representative A and B, and then it describes these members of the Grants Committee exist as a resource for jurors. They provide, upon request, broader community perspective and information on the City of Kingston objective for the CCAF program. They are not jurors and do not participate in evaluation of applications or contribute to funding decisions. And that is the language that was changed. It did exist in a similar format before. We added the phrase resource for jurors. We added upon request, and we added this sentence, they are not jurors. The reasoning behind that was that 2 years ago, we changed the language in the plan for admin to better reflect the jury process, because it previously identified voting and non-voting members, and there isn't a formal vote in CCAF, as you know, Councillor Stroud, it's by consensus. And so we removed that voting language, and then we found this section was lacking in terms of differentiating the role once we made that change. And so we just wanted to provide some clarity on how we feel that councillors already were participating, essentially, with this new language choice.
Yes, so I know that from my own participation, I tried to always frame my comments in relation to what I already knew, either in the community or in the policies of the city. in my participation, but obviously everyone that speaks at these consensus-seeking sessions has influence on the outcome. So, I mean, it says it, in the language it says, or contribute to funding decisions. I mean, not directly, I suppose. It's a little bit, having gone through it, it's a little bit confusing because the ex officio members, the same as staff and city and KAC staff, both contribute to the process, but not necessarily, they're not the decision makers. That's the role of the jury, I guess. Is that, I mean, it's clear to me because I've gone through it, but I don't know if it's clear from the wording that that's, it basically, my question is the jury consensus-seeking process going to be more or less the same? Because we were told at the beginning that the ex officio members what the role is and what it isn't. So is it essentially the same process? It's just that the wording is been updated?
Yeah, it's exactly the same process. That's correct, and the wording has been updated.
That's all for now.
Great. Any questions? Okay, I've got a couple. Since I was around when this thing started in 2007, this might be aimed at the city. This is Danielle Lucky? Danica. I even wrote it down. And so I don't know. So I'm always happy to see the big numbers. In terms of participation and all that, I can't quite. It says since inception, $6.4 million in funding has been allocated. So in the last 12 years, right? So 329 grants have been awarded. Then it says annual operating grants support 11 key arts organizations in Kingston, and a total of 212 project grants have been awarded. I don't see how those add up. 329, 11 plus 212. Not sure what I'm being told here.
I think I can comment on that it would be 11 for each year. It's not 11 in...
Well, the 11 key arts organizations, it says.
Yeah, but it's annually. It's annually to those 11. Is what it means.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
I know the difference. I've served those committees. I know the difference. But then it says a total of 212 project grants, which I'm willing to believe, but then the line above, it says 329 grants have been awarded. I'm not sure how those numbers fit together.
So I can sort of speak to that, and again, I'll have to do the math again, but essentially what you're reading in here is that since 2007, 11 arts organizations, and I believe in the early days it was actually 10 arts organizations received operating funding through the program. To date, in the program, 212 project grants have been awarded, so it's not necessarily 212 plus 11, but it's 212 plus 11 over the course of 12 years.
That's great. So how do you get in the line above that, since inception, which I take to be 2007, 6.4 million allocated to 329 grants? You would think the two numbers would add up.
Mr. Chair.
As was said over here, that sometimes it was 10 and 11 and just keeps repeating. Oh, okay.
And per year for 10 of the years, and then 2 years like with 11.
120 more or whatever.
Which would be 120 grants.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it said in 2019, this I thought was really impressive, that we invested as a city and through the organizations here, about $564,000. And 171,000 people took part. In one way or the other, they attended or they put it on or whatever, right? Everybody's in there, right? And $5.9 million was raised. Why can't they pay for themselves? No, I'm just kidding. But that's like generated spin-offs and everything, right? Okay.
And so I can speak to that, and Felix can jump in too, as this is statistics that is collected by the Arts Council staff through reporting systems, a national reporting system called CADAC. And so organizations that receive operating funds report back on total revenue generated. And so for us, it's really about the investment of CCAF at a local level actually helps stimulate additional revenue sources for these organizations. You know, provincial organizations, federal funding organizations look to see if organizations have the municipal funding support, and it helps them generate that additional revenue. So it's quite a staggering stat, but CCAF certainly has been that stimulant for organizations. So,
well, I just want to say that's great. Thank you all. The reason is that sometimes there's moves to cut expenses at City Hall, and that nothing like that's come up in the last few years, so don't take this the wrong way. But I think as councillors, we have to be prepared, right? This helps us be prepared. The interesting thing is, in a very crude sense, we actually gave money and people actually did something, okay? They actually put something on, somebody performed, somebody went, and it actually is right there. So I think that's really good and good to be able to point to. And no criticism of KEDCO, but their problem is much bigger because they can't see that most of the time, right? It's much more, we worked on this for 2 years and then they decided not to do it, right? So this is much more direct. So thank you, and that's all my questions. Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Straub.
Brought my attention to this, to those two numbers, so I wanted to ask one more question for framing of that. So the investment of $563,000 for that 1 year, and that same year, the reported revenues from the organization that received grant funding was $5.9 million. Do we have any benchmarks, comparators, as far as arts funding effectiveness goes? Like you said, you use a national program. Do you have anything to compare it to from other municipalities or from other arts organizations about that seed funding and how effective it is?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think, you know, the Arts Council, and again, please feel free to jump in, collects data over the course of the program's inception since 2007. Certainly, in terms of other municipalities of the same size of Kingston, the Arts Council may have some assessment of that, but we don't have direct comparisons in terms of what CCAF can generate in terms of revenue, but from an investment perspective, CCAF is actually quite strong in terms of the investment for a city of our size. Other cities like London, for example, I believe is around $650,000 in terms of the investment, and they're a much larger city. So we actually track quite high in terms of the investment in the arts. So I'm not sure if we have that direct comparison, but we certainly do invest a good amount for a city of our size.
So I'm aware of the per capita in the arts is above average in Kingston. I'm aware of that. I was talking more of the relation between the investment and that number that's quoted. I mean, it's not a direct relationship, but any arts organization could produce those two numbers. So maybe a suggestion to maybe try to find some comparators for future reporting, knowing that we're probably going to compare well. It would be nice to know that not only in the per capita number, but in the success of the grant seed money sort of measure, which is the elusive number that Councillor Hutchison is talking about that other organizations have a hard time demonstrating. If you can demonstrate it, it would really help protect you from future attempts to reduce funding.
Great. Any other questions? I need this to be put on the recommendation, or do we have to go to the next item? We don't. I'm just going through.
Yeah, there's no public here. So
yeah. Okay. Right. So the motion is item 8. I need someone to move it. Councillor Stroud, second by Councillor Kiley. Any remarks or questions from the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor? Passes. And item 9, motions, none. 10, notice of motions, none. 11, other business, none. Correspondence, none. Date and time of the next meeting is planned for February 27th, 2020. That, of course, would be the regular meeting. This is a special meeting, so we'll see you there. 14 is adjournment motion, please. The Councillor Sandy can't wait. Councillor Carley was second. All those in favor? Fine. The meeting's over. Thank you.